Okay, I think we're live. Looks good to me. Hello, hello. Let me know if you can hear me, see my screen, all that good stuff, and then yeah, we'll get going. Hope everyone's had a nice weekend. 2 episodes of Attack on Titan in a day came out yesterday, so you know it was a good weekend. Ryan says, "Hey girl." Hey Ryan. Sup Callie? Who remembers that one? AV good, thank you, Richard. I trust you on that one. Cred, you rarely speak about market strength and momentum. I disagree with that. Is that not part of your strategy? I probably just look at momentum differently, but I mean, if you're thinking of like oscillator divergence and stuff like that, maybe not. But you know, market strength is obviously important. I think momentum, quantitative traders and discretionary candlestick mugs like me probably look at momentum slightly differently, but you kind of have to pay attention to it. Just for me, it often comes out in like candle structure, what's being broken, how much is being retested, you know, that kind of stuff. But it's obviously important. Okay, sweet. I think we can get rolling. First things first, thank you to Blockfolio for supporting and sponsoring Technical Roundup. Visit blockfolio.com to check them out. The mobile app, no fees for trading, no fees for asset swap, is genuinely very good. And some more content from that direction should be coming soon. And yeah, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. We're almost at 17k subs, which would be cool. And getting to whatever triple-digit like numbers would be great, as always. Yeah, so no rush on these. We like to pace ourselves, and a lot of the time when the market's really boring and not as interesting as other times, you know, there's only so much we can talk about Bitcoin, but there's some very interesting and educational stuff to discuss with the market more broadly beyond just price action. Yeah, okay, cool. So we'll do the price stuff. Last week we experimented with discussing the kind of news events for the week, and some stuff has come out and giving a bit of perspective on that. You know, as I mentioned in the past, Donald and I would kind of avoid that because the typical kind of European imposter syndrome that, oh, we're not experts, we shouldn't talk about this, but you know, everyone's doing it, and we probably have slightly more reasoned views and conclusions than most people, at least on crypto YouTube side of things, so why not? Some really interesting stuff came up on my radar. So the first is, I'm sure some of you are following this stuff. This is Walter Bloomberg. He basically tweets the headlines from the Bloomberg terminal, so like the news, financial news as it comes in. And obviously good old Jerome, Mr. Powell, was speaking today and made some comments about cryptocurrencies. It's very cool in itself that it's almost unavoidable during these big speeches, finance conferences, whatever, you know, wherever you land in the traditional finance world, you'll always find, or very often now find, having an opinion on crypto is like necessary, right? You just can't avoid it, which is cool in itself. As I've mentioned like a million times in the past, it really felt like there was a significant existential risk for Bitcoin, crypto, whatever, after 2017 and into 2018, you know, bubble pop, volatility dies, 6k to 3k crash. It just really wasn't clear where the market was going. So to see it become this, for now at least, ubiquitous part of traditional finance is, or at least, you know, in the consideration of people who work in finance and kind of having it everywhere is pretty cool. So some of these comments, right, nothing too surprising. I think Jerome's been obviously on first name terms with him because we're best friends. Mr. Powell's position on crypto is like tends to be pretty reasonable, all things considered. So the first thing, you'll see a lot of this chatter, I think, in 2021 and beyond. So Fed continues to experiment with digital dollar, ECB, so the European Central Bank, also always comes up and starts chatting about the digital euro and central bank digital currency and all that type of stuff. Now, it's all very cool. I don't mind it at all, having central bank coins, especially if they add an element of transparency and, it's your classic open public ledger blockchain, whatever, where you can monitor the transactions and have them labeled, etc. I think it adds a layer of transparency that could very much be used, as opposed to having to sift through economic data or releases or go to these central banks' websites. So that would be cool. But I think what a lot of normies get confused with, and again, we take this for granted, but it's not obvious for a lot of people, central bank digital currencies are not the same as permissionless, decentralized cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, for example, right? The whole point is permissionless, immutable, right? No chargebacks, no censorship. That's really one of the driving propositions of Bitcoin, among other things, at least on a transactional basis. Whereas with central bank digital currencies, just like many of the ways in which stablecoins are regulated, you can blacklist addresses, you can freeze addresses, you have all sorts of powers to essentially censor or interfere with payments, transactions, whatever. And I wouldn't be surprised if central bank digital currencies come up with similar mechanisms, right, depending on what they're used for. But it's really the permissionless element that we need to focus on, and where the real distinction comes in. I know it's obvious to us, but for a lot of normies, they're like, oh, well, no one's in charge of Bitcoin, but if a central bank makes their own coin, they're so intelligent and have all these resources, wouldn't that defeat Bitcoin's value proposition? And the answer in my mind is no. I think they're really quite different. I'm not in the extremist camp to which, any central bank currency is bad. I think it can be used well, but it's not a competitor, so to speak, not if we're being honest as to the use cases, in my view. So, yeah, this point, sort of more neutral. The work on, I presume, the digital dollar is not motivated by other developing private sector currencies like Bitcoin. I'm not so sure. It seems quite coincidental, or slightly too coincidental, to basically believe that Bitcoin's the talk of the land, talk of the country, talk of the world, so to speak, and then the central banks rushing to make their own digital currencies is just a pure coincidence, not motivated by developments in Bitcoin. Not so sold on that, but doesn't really matter. Crypto assets more for speculation, not as a means of payment. It depends on the crypto asset, right? This follow-up comment makes a bit more sense, especially with regard to Bitcoin, right? More like gold, I think really applies to Bitcoin more so than a lot of shitcoins. I think the store of value narrative is most persuasive in Bitcoin's case, beyond a lot of altcoins. But those two are, you can kind of see why these two go together, right? It's not a means of payment, more like gold than the dollar. But even this in itself, just seeing this is really cool. So, a central bank chair basically acknowledge the value proposition that we all have, or a lot of us share, for Bitcoin. Seeing that come up on the Bloomberg terminal is pretty cool. And again, regulation is not where it needs to be on global stablecoins. Probably see more of that coming in 2021, 2022. And it makes sense, right? As you get central bank digital currencies, and if they want to get adoption for those, you need to almost create some sort of incentive or mechanism to use them. Full stop, but also maybe use them preferentially to less regulated stable coins. And so, the best way to defeat the competition is to regulate the shit out of them, which is what you see, why lobbying is so prevalent in airline industries and other parts of the world as well. Regulation is just a really strong anti-competition tool in many cases, as counterintuitive as it may seem, right? So I think that kind of narrative is going to play a part in the next year or so. Central banks pushing their own digital currencies, and then conveniently in tandem a harsher regulation on stablecoins, right? And then final comment, not good store of value. I think, it makes sense, the eye test argument for crypto not being a good store of value. You can kind of see it. It's it goes up so much and then it crashes and it goes up and whatever. You can sort of sympathize with that on a very basic level, but it depends which cryptocurrencies, right? If you talk about Bitcoin, is it an amazing store of value when it's defined as just not really doing much from when you invested? No, I guess. But the fact that it not just stores your value, but preserves it and, increases it as well, given how how it's performed over the last 5-10 years, you can kind of come to terms with the volatility. And, the second argument, which is slightly more sophisticated, one made by Eric Wall, go listen to that podcast episode if you haven't already. And his argument is basically like, look, you can kind of expect volatility to be here as Bitcoin reaches critical mass, as it moves towards that gold market cap target. It makes sense, given the asymmetry between its current market cap and the gold market cap, that there's going to be volatility on the way as it sort of moves in that direction. But once it reaches that sort of threshold, critical mass, whatever percentage fraction of gold's market cap, we can sort of expect things to slow down, at least for Bitcoin, and then the volatility arguably to trickle down towards altcoins more generally. So this isn't wrong per se about not a good store of value when defined in the conventional way, but I don't think it has to be a good store of value right now to do its job correctly in the future. And like, not many people are going to, like, normally if you make a critique that something's not a good store of value, you'd be thinking of like, Turkish liras, bolivars, whatever, and like, oh, well, I was trying to store my value in local currency and then it got inflated away or lost its purchasing power relative to whatever basket of currencies, etc. But in this case, it's almost absurd to level that critique at Bitcoin, because almost any amount of money that you've put in over any point, you've increased your purchasing power or assets or however you measure wealth, unless you bought the actual Pico top. Right, so you can kind of stomach the criticism if it's not a good store of value if you've made a shit ton of money. So just some interesting comments. Not good, not bad. Just I think setting the scene is pretty interesting with these things. By the way, if this is boring or shitty or you don't want to hear it, let me know. I'm always open-minded towards feedback on these things, but it's personally pretty fun cruising over the news with you ladies and gents. This one was really interesting. I saw this Bitcoin IRA thing, and again, this is another trend which I think is going to develop over the next 1 to whatever number of years, of these sort of structured products which confer tax benefits on users or investors in Bitcoin, right? This to me was great. So it's again one of those interest rates products. I think it's 6% annually on cash and crypto holdings, Bitcoin IRA, and this is obviously from the PR Newswire. There's nothing like super special here, but the bit that made me laugh was, I think, towards the bottom. Where is it? It's something about middleman. Yeah. So look, investors, this is just so funny to me, because you never really know what these interest products, how they actually achieve the yield that they achieve. But this part to me is almost like cynically hilarious, right? Just this paragraph. So investors can create an account today, deposit funds into a self-directed retirement account, and then enroll in Bitcoin IRA Earn. Awesome. Unlike traditional banks, where the average savings rate is only 0.05%, the IRA Earn program offers rates approximately 100 times higher, up to 6% annually, and this is just the best half sentence I've ever read, based on the blockchain's unique ability to remove the middleman. This is just fucking meaningless drivel, right? Like, imagine someone offers you a high yield product or like a savings instrument, whatever, for you to invest, and you're making 100 times more than you would the bank. And you're like, okay, well, obviously higher yields or higher rates means that the risk is somewhere higher or moved along the chain, whatever. There's some sort of premium being baked in to the higher rate that I'm receiving. So Steve, for example, how is it that I go from 0.05 to 6%? And he just looks at you and says, well, mate, it's based on the blockchain's unique ability to remove the middleman. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? This means nothing, right? Like, are you trading shitcoins? Are you in the GBTC trade? Are you yield farming? What are you actually doing with my money to offer me 6% rates? But I was just reading this PR Newswire, and it's just like, based on the blockchain's unique ability to remove the middleman. I couldn't help but laugh at this shit. I just thought I'd share that because it's actually hilarious. Yeah, no middleman equals number go up. I know, it's incredible. A couple of other things which are really important, and we're kind of moving slightly towards the price side of things. The first one, a good thread by my good friend, Split Capital, about the first quarter of Bitcoin market structure. I'm going to link it here, but it's got some really interesting overview stuff about where we are. So final week of 2021, right? And recapping basically what we've had. And these are all just really good points, and I think it's important to get that type of context as we prepare for the next few months of price action. So in the macro lens, we put in near 100% gain on top of the previous quarter, while other macro assets have barely been able to hold value. Again, these are data points which traditional investors, they're only going to be able to ignore for so long, especially if we get more regulated products like ETFs, etc., arriving on the scene. You're just not going to be able to ignore performance like this without getting some sort of allocation. Especially the second point, or third point, I guess, in the slide, proves a very similar point. The gold is of particular interest as the closest store of value. In the same time period, they've traded nearly inverse as gold sees record outflows in ETF redemptions and Bitcoin sees fresh wave of structured products. Right? I mean, this is what you want to see data-wise if you're going to make a compelling argument for Bitcoin moving towards gold market cap, right? Like if someone were to say Bitcoin's going to capture a fraction of gold's market cap, and then you saw Bitcoin versus gold, and these lines were flipped, obviously the persuasive power of that type of narrative would be way, way lower than it would otherwise be. So I'm just dealing with a couple of spammy pricks in the chat. Yeah. Whereas this, if anything, reinforces the narrative point that the bid on gold is vanishing to some extent or becoming weaker at the expense of Bitcoin, and outflows into gold and inflows into Bitcoin, it's really the icing on the cake. One point that I think is often ignored when it comes to Bitcoin versus gold is there's this assumption that as a traditional finance investor, whatever type of person, you need to believe that Bitcoin is going to full stop overtake gold in order to invest in Bitcoin, right? Like, okay, if you invest in Bitcoin, that means you believe that it's 100%, it's going to flip in gold. But that's not true, right? A lot of the trades that we make are based on, well, obviously probabilistic and only need to be somewhat right in order to make money. So for example, if we take the Ethereum discussion, let's say I think Ethereum is still, that no Ethereum competitor is going to flip in Ethereum. But that doesn't mean that a competitor, like let's say Solana, for example, can't capture 10%, 10% of that market share, right? So it's that asymmetry that we're trying to capture. You don't need to capture 100% of an existing network effect, market cap, whatever, for the trade to be worth it. So as these traditional investors look at Bitcoin versus gold, they don't need to basically ditch gold to buy Bitcoin. They can even probabilistically assess that maybe it's going to move to 20, 40, 50% of gold's market cap. Or let's say even the probability of it flipping gold is like 1, 2, 5%. Even those fractional arguments or those marginal probabilities are enough in many cases to warrant allocation. So as these sorts of data points, in my view, stick around or become more pronounced, those marginal arguments will also become more persuasive, at least in my opinion. This is something we're going to talk about with regard to options in a second. In realized volatility, Bitcoin's been able to retain modestly strong market structure. As we can all tell from the charts, 1 month realized volatility, lowest point of the calendar year, right? I think IVs are super low as well. Implied vols are down to lowest levels since December, as we can see by the price chart no less, and also options data reflecting that as well. Market froth indicator, in this case funding on perpetual swaps, also kind of stable, normalized, low, etc. Liquidity at higher prices, order books are deep, spreads are tight, things are looking good. Stable coins up. Also interesting to see an expansion beyond just Tether. USDC being the main one, mostly because it's locked up in DeFi, or it's really widely used in DeFi, but BUSD packs and DAI, also a DeFi one, picking up. This is the classic chart, kind of the main Bitcoin narrative chart that we've been following since forever, where Bitcoin on reserves down, Bitcoin price essentially up, right? So simple on-chain metrics, the accumulation of Bitcoin in a very systematic way, 20% and 5% decrease in Bitcoin held on exchange, right? It's just being bought up, and you can also see that in outflows, etc., etc. Oh, my DMs are open? My bad. Oh, nothing too scary there. Thank you for letting me know. So yeah, that's kind of the data overview. So things are looking good. from a high time frame point of view. Normally when things get really bubbly, frothy, etc., we'd usually expect to see a higher funding, volatility to be super high, and things getting spiky, etc. But this calm for the time being is actually pretty reasonable, all things considered. One of the questions might be, well, where is the volatility gone? And a good and kind of an awesome thread that I read about this was actually written by, here we go, Mer Petrol. Go follow him, her, them, I don't know. There's the link. And this is to do with options expiry, right? Now, my understanding, I didn't trade options. I've got like a baseline, just about passable understanding of the Greeks. So I would strongly recommend you go read this thread for a decent breakdown. We can kind of scroll through it. And this thesis essentially argues that volatility is being pinned down, or prices are being squished based on a large options expiry that's coming up this week, right? So coming into the 26th, we have a huge notional amount of options expirations, almost 6 billion USD. I don't know if this is the biggest of all time, but it's definitely up there. And actually, the last big options expiry we had, which comes to mind, was around the point of this Elon candle here. Was it this one? I think it was. I think when he changed his name changed his profile to Bitcoin. I think. I could be totally wrong here, but this seems to be where my memory points me toward. If I'm wrong, let me know. But I think we also had, and yes, the Elon bio thing was here, but also we had a big options expiry on this move as well, right? Now the argument made here is really interesting. I think it says 29th of January. If you go back in time to the week of 29th of January, price action was almost magnetized towards a certain level. Surrounding this level with possible gamma, with basically gives you the definition of pinning the strike, right? And then it basically takes that argument and applies it to current price action, given the expiry we've got coming up later this week. Oh, there's a previous Elon candle. Yeah, okay. You're right. The fat green candle was Tesla said they invested. Yeah, okay. I'm getting all confused by all the Tesla narratives at this point. So, like, the very basic explanation, I recommend you read the thread. But, so gamma is basically the rate of change in an options delta, right? So as expirations draws nearer, and the expiration here is on the 26th, so as we approach the 26th, gamma of at-the-money options, so options trading at the strike price, it increases, right? And the strike for these is around, I think, 57k, right? Let me see. It's around 57, 58k. So when you pin the strike, as we approach expiration, right, gamma of at-the-money options, it grows. And when gamma increases, if I'm correct, again, this isn't exactly my thing, so small changes in the underlying price, so in this case in the price of Bitcoin, has a larger impact on the options delta, right? So in order to remain kind of delta neutral, you're basically more sensitive to changes in the underlying price as you approach expiry, right? Higher gamma, small changes in the underlying price have a larger impact on the options delta. So in order to remain delta neutral, you need to buy or sell more of the underlying, so Bitcoin in this case, to remain delta neutral. And it kind of approaches this climax point as the expiry date approaches, which for this week is the 26th. I've probably butchered that explanation. I think it's just about right, or gets the broad points. You can see here, gamma becomes stronger and stronger, yes, which means the act of hedging takes more and more spot volume to correctly offset. Yeah, so it's harder to remain delta neutral as gamma becomes stronger, and it becomes stronger into, or as, basically approaching expiry. So price gets pushed away from the outer bands with more strength as each day passes, creating a dampening effect on price action, which is what we're seeing now, right? What we've seen recently. This is actually dumping pretty hard during the course of this stream. Maybe we should go offline, so give the market a chance to bounce. So once the expiration happens, the hedging is no longer needed with such force, and price will be allowed to return to be, to a much more volatile state. And then what this thread does, it says, okay, well, once this expiration happens, what's the option skew or positioning beyond that point? And it generally looks bullish, is the argument that I've inferred from this, with IVs pretty low. Let's see whale calls, actually. We're getting some licks. Yeah, long licks. There we go. As you'd expect. So yeah, taking us back to the price chart side of things, I think that's most of the interesting / important stuff covered. I hope that wasn't too boring, but given the market's kind of been flat, and altcoins really haven't had my attention, I thought it'd be a useful exercise to go through the news, go through market structure, and kind of give you my measured opinion about what's going on. If that was helpful, let me know. If it wasn't helpful, also let me know. Feedback, always grateful. So, jumping into the TA side of things, I'm kind of devoid of strong views for the time being. So if we look at the weekly close, the weekly close was okay, right? Like, I'm fine with it. So I'm treating the last few weeks of price action as a kind of range, where you've got the breakout level at the range high, then the support level at the range low. And on a candle kind of closing basis, it closed at support, right? It wasn't a bearish close. You had a lot of buying towards the week end. So it wasn't a breakdown at weekly structure, at least in my opinion. Yeah, Alejandra says Uni V3 teaser today. We've had Uni version 3 teasers for like many weeks now. So yeah. So the weekly close was fine. On the daily time frame, my view hasn't changed. I think we had this discussion where we talked about the best Bitcoin levels to trade this week, or last week, I guess that was the title. And the argument was essentially, you've got a range high here, you've got a range midpoint at 51.52, and then you've got a range low at 44.46. And we basically spent our entire time more or less at the range high, neither breaking out nor breaking down. If anything, I'd say from the existing candle closes, as much as it may not seem to be the case, the bulls are the ones who are slightly more comfortable. And the reason for that is, if we remove our lines for a sec, make it go up, thank you. I'm not sure I can do that alone. If we take it from a kind of candle close basis, if this is our level, we had a close below and then a rally into the level during the course of these 2 days. So I think this portion here, these 3 candles, was when, if the market was going to take a huge shit on a retest, that was really the window to do so, right? But it didn't. Instead, kind of traded above the level, and now it's, at least on a closing basis, it's acting more as support than it is as resistance, right? It had a chance to act bearishly on this upthrust back into it, and it didn't. So that's kind of the only observation I can make on the daily time frame. If you wanted to, given we're in this breakout high area generally, I really don't think there's anything wrong with using a daily range like this. Lowest close as support, highest close as resistance, and pretty much using those boundaries to trade and or for directional bias. So any daily closes below the lower boundary, then this chop is probably going to resolve to the downside towards our range midpoint level at 51.52. And similarly, any break of resistance through 59k, volatility most likely resolves to the upside, with the market currently being closer towards the support side of things. So that's kind of the hottest take, I guess, I have. This would need to get reclaimed in the next few hours, I'd say, max, for this to look okay. Not something I'd sell into myself, just a really fast move into a daily level, not a setup that I've got. But I honestly think if you could just pretty much delete all your levels and just say we're in a low vol environment, support, lowest close, resistance, highest close. This is my range, and I'm not going to fade the daily breakout from this consolidation. With the upside breakout target being 60 keks plus, and the downside target being 51, 52, and then any lower time frame trading, usual rules apply as to doing business at the extremes. Might get a bounce set up here if things set up appropriately in a bit. But yeah, does that make sense for Bitcoin for the time being? Also, thank you for your feedback about the fundamental news, whatever side of things. I'm more than happy to do it if there's an appetite for it. If there isn't, I don't mind skipping it either. You know how it is. And let's get 200 likes. I'm sure we're more than capable of such a basic target with 500 beautiful people in here. What do you mean by fade? By fade, I mean step in the way of something. That's what I mean by fade. I'm not talking about haircuts. Are equities nuking? No, equities go up. Well, not in the short term, but nothing too terrifying there. Yeah, so that's Bitcoin. The big options expiry is on the 26th. I'm going to broadly assume that thesis is correct, and we're going to be somewhat range bound until then, but I'll probably use these daily boundaries. I'm not even going to add them to my chart, to be honest with you. I'll probably use these as my guide for the time being. I'm going to make that a dotted dashed line, and I'm going to call that daily range low. Okay, and then I'm going to call this daily range high, just for some shorter term price action. Yeah, so that's Bitcoin. We can revisit it towards the end of the stream, see if we get some sort of bouncy boy set up from 55s. Otherwise, that's all I have got. For ETH, I still think there's a really nice... I mean, it's clearly not nice. It's been an absolute pain in the ass ever since the drop and bounce. What do you think of the Putin speech? Which one? Which speech are you referring to? What, the exchange with Joe Biden or something else? So for ETH, I still think the weekly range is quite well defined. You have the breakout level here and the resistance level here. That's it. That's all I've got. And the thing is, on lower time frames, like normally you'd say, okay, that's the weekly range, and then can we break it down on the daily and lower time frames to get a more reasonable trading environment, and maybe some lower time frame levels to trade from. But on lower time frames, it's just like it's just worse to trade than Bitcoin. It doesn't look good, doesn't move as much. It's a pain in the ass in comparative terms, at least in my view, even for shorter term trading. So I think for ETH, swing trades will become apparent and become worth it when these range boundaries trade. When these range boundaries break. So we're in a bull market. I'm generally expecting in one form or another support to hold and or resistance to break. But if that's wrong for some reason, I'll have to change my view. So that means range low / buy the dip and pray, fade the nuke, whatever you want to call it, at 1300s or wherever this consolidation falls, and then the trend continuation breakout stuff is through 1800s. Anything in between, if you have an edge, fantastic, but you're probably not going to get a trending move until we get a weekly close through one of these boundaries. And yeah, you can see you're not really missing out on much here. The only mid-term level that I don't really mind is, at least for like a short-term bounce play, is this 1600 area, which we talked about ages ago in like one of the short videos. So just to break that weekly range down very slightly on the daily time frame, this is the big kind of weekly range high. This area is the big weekly range low, and then the daily time frame. The midpoint of that weekly range with some decent daily structure is at 1600. So you previously had range low there, bit of choppy, messy price action, but then resistance, breakout, and then you're expecting some sort of support structure to be formed there. As I've explained before, what you probably could get away with doing is just drawing out this cluster here as your level, and saying, you know, resistance, resistance, breakout. That's your nearest support if the market takes a tumble. So on a very short-term basis, if we get our kind of, if this decides to expand to the downside, which would suck because Bitcoin would probably not look good at that point either. If that decides to break market structure here and drop, there's probably some sort of low time frame ping pong style bounce. The first area of support on any leg down for me is 1600. Just as a something to have on your radar if things start to get a bit slippery. Prices usually draw towards the max pain in the options market. See, some people who have much larger brains than I do seemingly conducted a study as to whether there's any truth to that in the crypto markets, like the impact of max pain prices in the options market, and it doesn't seem persuasive, at least from the evidence that I've seen broken down. So I'm not so sure whether I want to give a lot of weight to the max pain approach with regard to the crypto options market, simply because people much smarter than I don't seem to think it holds water, so to speak. So yeah, 1600 FTA, says Scott Blair. Yeah, 1600 FTA, more or less. And again, this is like a weekly, well, it's a daily level, so it can very much wick below that or whatever, but that's kind of the area that I'd be aware of if this is a breakdown indeed. And yeah, obviously, while I was talking to you on the stream, as I drew this line, I bought it to the very bottom tick. And now that we're up, how much are we up? Now that we're up 0.3%, I've made $3 million using 125x leverage. So I don't need this live stream anymore. Thanks for watching. I'm going to go fuck off to an island and retire. Easy trade, easy bottom snipe. Buy my trading course. None of that is true. I'm joking. Please don't do any of the above. We can look at ETH BTC actually. Quick sell. Let's wreck him. Yeah. Yeah. ETH BTC is just hard stuck. And the area that it's stuck at is one that it can't afford not to hold to some extent. And it's based on weekly market structure. So you had high, if we're taking the big swings, low, higher high, and then the question is it going to reverse off of this and make another higher high? No. Well, okay, where is the higher low area that it could reasonably dip to? And for me, it's basically this breakout level here, right? Which is where it's finding support. The high before the lower low, which is then acting as support. That's where we're at now on the market structure type of level. And that's really what needs to hold. Because otherwise, I think we pretty much drift back towards the breakout level and these lows if this isn't where the higher low is going to come in. So it's still at support. The candle closes haven't been too nice. If we look at weekly structure in a slightly more zoomed in way, you can kind of see we technically broke it, or at least made a lower low close, which isn't necessarily a sign of strength. But this area here is pretty much the best candidate for any type of higher low in ETH BTC. I think if you want to be conservative, you can basically go back to the breakout level where a lot of this pain and agony comes from, which is here. And basically argue that if that gets reclaimed, or if maybe even if the consolidation before that level failed gets reclaimed, right, through there is when you get your ETH BTC kind of bull market type of deal. But yeah, that's the slightly more conservative version. But this is like a month of bearish / sideways. I wouldn't rule it out yet, given it's not closed below support, but it's been a bit. Anyone who's been trading ETH knows that it's been a bit of a pain in the ass. So that's waiting for that to change. Waiting for that to change. What do I think of DeFi Perp? What do I think of DeFi Perp? I mean, it's just like a lot of the DeFi. You'd expect the index obviously to reflect its constituents to some extent, and yeah, chop. Nothing interesting here. No obvious reads from market structure to indicate one way or another. Chop. I don't think of anything for the time being, to be completely honest. I don't think there's much to say about this. One thing, again, to keep an eye on is Uni version 3. And we also know that Sushi is always hot on Uni's heels with regard to their own updates as well. So we'll see how that develops. Uni BTC is looking decent, right? Missed the pullback level that I had on the weekly, but generally looking pretty good, all things considered. And obviously Uni Perp, so the dollar pair, pushing higher as well. So this will probably do well. This actually pulled back to the lowest close level that we discussed, I think. Pretty sure we had this level at 28.8. So nice pullback to support and poking at the highs now. Depending on how/when Uni V3 comes out, that's probably one of those more straightforward catalysts that's going to send this higher. And maybe DeFi benefits overall in that type of instance as well. But yeah, DeFi perp, flat. I'd focus on the stronger pairs within the DeFi sector. The ones with upcoming news, catalysts, whatever. Uni's one of them, Sushi's one of them, and I'm sure there are others as well. Reason for using X perp pairs over XUSD, it's the same thing, Asher Wilson. Perp is just the contract, the perpetual swap of the USD contract. Like the future, which doesn't expire, of the altcoin/USD pair. Maybe sell the news, sir? Maybe. Yeah, maybe. But perhaps not in a market like this. I can totally see the case for that, though. You mentioned TRX is not interesting for you. Yeah, I think it's just it wasn't moving when I looked at it. That's probably the best explanation. Yeah. I mean, against Bitcoin, there's really not much to say for the time being. If the weekly time frame breaks out, maybe you have a case for a move back towards the range. So if we kind of eyeball this chart, right? If we eyeball this chart, we've got local high resistance thing here, and then a big old former support turn resistance a bit higher. So from a range point of view, if it breaks that, then we have space to move from A to B. But until that kind of materializes, it's not too interesting, so to speak, at least against Bitcoin. I expect the USD pair is doing okay, given how the BTC pair looks. Obviously, but not a whole lot. The thing is, you'll see a ton of altcoin USD pairs which look like this, which are setting new all-time highs, poking at former highs, etc., right? So then the question is, do you have to long all of them, or how do you filter for quality, or which ones to pick out of a basket of seemingly infinite new altcoin USD all-time highs? And one of the answers as to how to filter them, or a mechanism for choosing strong ones over weak ones, or coming to a shorter list at the end of the day, fundamental analysis is one of them. As Halo Crypto says, looking at news catalysts that are coming up is another. Listings, sure, but from a TA point of view, if all the alt USD pairs look the same or similar, then it's really the alt BTC pair which is going to separate the men from the boys, the wheat from the chaff, the goats from the donkeys. I don't know, I've run out of idioms. But that's really where you can break things down more meaningfully. Oh, TRX is not even close to all-time high? Yeah, I'm sorry, you're right. This is the fucking perp, of course it is. Oh, come on. Yeah, there we go. You are absolutely correct. Shows how much I know about TRX. How much has that got left in percentage terms? Yeah, that's that's a lot. My apologies. It is not setting new USD highs. But nonetheless, when many altcoins are, using BTC as an extra confluence factor is still suggested. So that's why TRX doesn't have a ton of my attention. How will the options affect Bitcoin price when they expire? Thanks. We discussed some of that, son. How to read Alt BTC though? I would say the same as any other chart in most cases. I don't see a huge difference to distinguish them. Oh, you see, I made another 10 million on this candle here. Life is good. I love you all. I'm not being serious. But yeah, I think daily closes that respect this kind of range low confluence above 55, probably fine. As long as this thing doesn't crap itself before the expiry, and maybe we get a bit of a lift off after that, that would be cool. Anything else kind of sucks. Borna, I'm not serious. I'm not making any... I'm not in a trade right now. SPX BTC broke weekly level, says Nowzer. Let's look at it. Yeah, sort of. I assume you mean this type of consolidation here broke that weekly level. Are you a CME gap guy, Cred? No, I don't really pay a lot of attention to it. Oh, you can hear the owl in the background. Man, my background noise can't be that good. If my audio sucks and if the background kind of sounds of nature are annoying, let me know. I think they tend to add a pretty good ambience to the stream, but I can certainly add a noise gate or do something to pull things down a little bit. But, you know, I live in a really expensive part of my parents' house. It's the basement with a window, so I like to take advantage of the luxuries that it offers. Are you hiding in the woods? No, I haven't quite upgraded from mum's basement to cabin in the woods quite yet, but if Bitcoin goes to $1 million, I'll finally be a millionaire, and then we can make some moves. Someone asking about Cardano. Charles Hoskinson's been throwing hands on Twitter, hasn't he? Oh, I don't blame him. Look at look at this thing. So this is basically this current candle is man. My sense of humor is it seems to fall really flat on live streams. I just said if Bitcoin goes to 1 million, I'll be a millionaire, and then the question is, so you have 1 Bitcoin? Question mark, question mark, question mark. It's a classic Trader Main joke. Just go watch the Technical Roundup episode with Trader Main. It's something I just stole it from him. He said, "Look, I want Bitcoin to go to $1 million because I'll be a millionaire." Just found it hilarious. Yeah, so Cardano is currently there are 9 days left on this monthly, and it's currently Operation Save the Monthly Candle. Because the monthly trade is essentially reclaim the range low and move towards the range high. Right? That's the monthly trade. If it fails and closes below the lower boundary, then it's screwed. It's a failed reclaim of the old range low, and your target is not the range high, but rather more or less this kind of breakout level here, which would retrace most of the bullish month. So it's kind of Operation Save the Monthly on ADA BTC at the moment. As for the weekly, is there evidence on the weekly that this monthly time frame is looking particularly healthy? And not right now. The weekly kind of looks rough, in my opinion. Looking at this monthly level, you had breakout and then not only a close below, but then a kind of retest candle showing that this area is being sold into, so resistance being found there, which kind of sucks. And if we just take some liberties and draw out this whole cluster, pre-breakout, consolidation, whatever, we arrive, unsurprisingly, at a similar conclusion that this is currently acting as resistance. So the bullish case, of course, would be back above here. That's great. You know, you're risk defined at the low and you swing it towards the range high. That's awesome. But for the time being, until it starts closing back above this monthly area, weekly cluster, whatever, it doesn't look strong. And yeah, there hasn't been much in, the behavior is quite different in the USD pair as a result as well. We're almost at 300 likes. I think we can smash it for this video. That would be awesome. A nice little target to meet. Dimitri says audio BTC is tearing up again. Audio BTC. Oh gosh, I mean, yeah, that's strong. Yeah, if you get a daily breakout, looks pretty decent. Yeah, you're right. Do you think you can make more money with Bitcoin or altcoins because they have more room to move? Depends how you trade. Your mum told you to get the F out of ADA. Interesting. Kevin says, where do you spend your time on in calm markets? The Overwatch ranked ladder is the answer, as well as reading books, exercise, spending time with my siblings, working on some trading content. Usual stuff. Nothing too left of field. We actually did look at Phil, so if you go to trletter.com, right? Just type that in, trletter.com. It's our weekly newsletter, which comes out in like 24 hours. And the altcoins we talked about last week were actually Filecoin, Dot, and Link. And I think Filecoin did pretty damn well. So when was that? That was on the 16th. So here. Right? Was it 15th daily close? Yeah, okay, 16th. So I mean that went up, right? Legged up. I think this was the news of... This was Grayscale, right? Grayscale Trust added some shitcoins, and it was Filecoin, Link, and there was some other stuff as well. So this looks fine to me. It's obviously reasonably far from daily structure, but that's kind of what you'd expect on a big breakout. Like in these cases, I could just sit here, for example, and draw these lower time frame support levels as the range low, and I think that's fine. I think that's totally reasonable. But I know that for me personally, from an execution point of view, I'd either need this range to develop further and then give me something actionable, or nuke back towards structure where I can play some sort of bounce. So, looks good. I think the easier move has already played out, more or less, the follow through on this breakout. It's less clear to me up here than it was at this point. Did Dot break out after all? That's one of the most painful ranges. Oh, it's still going. This is just coiling super hard. I think the range low that we've got in Technical Roundup is this. Something like that, around 30, 31, 32. It kind of reminds me of Sushi. We have a range low and prices just getting really grindy, and then you get expansion to the upside, if memory serves correctly. Yeah, sort of similar, although even this breakout hasn't been great. But it's kind of reinforced the same point. You get a range low, you get a bit of grindy price action, which then breaks higher, but this, yeah, it's certainly slightly different in terms of trend strength or momentum than the preceding legs up. Oh yeah, and we can take a look at Link, of course. Look at Link BTC first. What do you main in Overwatch? Ooh, mate, I mean, I flex everything. I usually just fill. So what? Ryan, Zarya, Bap, Ana, Lucio. Something along those lines. Yeah, so Link BTC weekly just keeps running into a wall in the form of this weekly level here. Hi, Alex. What's up, man? Unless that's a fake. Alex, in which case, be gone, but I'm assuming that's Alex. Yeah, I think this is like Donald's favorite level ever, and I like it as well. You know, resistance, get your choppy stuff, and then normally this is like an amazing bounce setup with your risk at the low into whatever, this cluster, but it's just not being bid, right? And yeah, the weekly close below, and then this week, or the past week, looks like a retest of that level. So high time frame strength through here, you probably rally at least to where the bearish retest took place, if not higher. But like for the time being, or from the available evidence, this is acting more as resistance than it is support. So it kind of looks like price breaking out from the range high and then failing to bounce, which normally suggests a move towards the opposite side of the range, which in this case is more or less here. So watch this. If you get strength through it, the high is vulnerable, if not higher. From what I've got on my chart right now, it's acting more as resistance than it is support. In those cases, when you get those range high reclaims, price falling back below it, your natural target tends to be the range low. I don't think there's anything hugely divergent in the USD pair. I mean, it looks okay. There's nothing wrong with it, but again, a lot of altcoins will sort of look like this, right? Grindy, near old/new highs type of price action. So you need something to separate the crap ones from the ones that were actually worth pursuing. And looking at the altcoin Bitcoin pair is, I still think, one of the best mechanisms for doing that or achieving that goal. We're 9 likes away from 300. Give me my dopamine injection, I swear to God. The chemical reactions in my brain become hugely unfavorable if that arbitrary criterion isn't met. I'm joking, obviously, I'm fine. The chemicals in my brain are totally balanced. Yeah, so I mean, generally speaking, if we go to the overview tab, Bitcoin and ETH, low volatility, nothing too scary on a kind of candle closing basis or market structure basis yet, in my opinion. Looks fine, but slow/grindy. If Bitcoin breaks much below 55, then I think we have to entertain the idea of price failing to bounce from the former range high and trading towards the range low. Evidence, we'll probably know within the next day or two whether how this is going to play out, right? For the time being, at support, if it isn't, I'd get out of the way until at least 51, 52. But I personally don't have setups to sell in here, at least not before a daily close through 55. On the ETH side of things, I think it's just a kind of almost inferior Bitcoin where it doesn't capture the upside when Bitcoin goes up, but it tends to capture more downside when Bitcoin goes down. We almost, you know, I mean, that just sucks. So here, I would defer to the weekly range that we drew, which was essentially the following, right? Range high, basically the top candle. Range low, the breakout candle. Weekly/consecutive daily closes through those boundaries will likely be the trigger for ETH becoming an attractive trade. Anything beyond that isn't hugely appealing, with the possible exception of if this market decides to dive or take a real shit. The first bounce level, at least on lower timeframes for me, is the 1600 area. So that's on the ETH side of things. Does your girlfriend watch your live stream? I do not have a girlfriend. So I suppose the answer is no. Altcoins, if we just scroll through alt, mid, DeFi, Holy, etc., they're all just very, very choppy, right? So sure, there are outliers, as there will always be on the altcoin side of things, but nothing sectorally or individually has completely got me hooked. Maybe Uni V3 catalyzes some risk in that area, but I think Bitcoin and ETH need to look less scary for altcoin appetite to follow through. That would be how things would align in my mind. On the macro side of things, we may continue to get some in-flight turbulence with bonds, equities, whatever, traditional market headlines slapping us around a little bit, but I don't see anything too scary, at least not immediately. And I'd say throughout all of this kind of rates, bonds, traditional market pressure, Bitcoin's generally held up pretty well for the time being. So if we get some relief on that front and a bit of stability, we'll probably probably good to go on that front. Soldier Boy tweeting about Ethereum. Oh, man. Oh, here we go. So while I was talking to you, I sold up here. So thanks for your, thanks for watching. I'm having a great time. I guess this is just a Bitcoin watch room now, Let's see what happens. Just watching my net worth take a big shit. No big deal. Yeah, keep, Oh, I bought 100 million at the low. Thank you. Obviously on the 1 minute, the only time frame that's ever worth watching. Am I a millennial? I don't think so. I'm 24. What does that make me? A kid? Gen Z? Okay, Gen Z it is. Zoomer. Do you think it's too late to invest in grayscale tokens play? If you're just trading the momentum move off of that, probably a little bit late. But depends on your investment horizon. If it's a kind of, oh, well, it's getting listed, it's becoming a grayscale product, therefore I will buy, you're probably late to that. But as for the mid to longer term perspective, maybe there's something there. But just to be clear, there's no guarantee that something being a grayscale product just means it's going to go up, right? So, especially relative to Bitcoin. Like Litecoin Grayscale Trust or whatever has been around for ages, and Litecoin Bitcoin is one of the worst looking charts in the world. So it doesn't guarantee performance relative to Bitcoin. Is Grayscale the new Palm Beach? I didn't think we're quite there. So yeah, we all bought the low and Cred inviting us to his yacht. Yeah, yacht. How do you pronounce that word? Yachta. I'll just say it in Russian. There we go. Na yachtu. Finding resistance here would be shitty. Please don't do it. С девочками. How Russian are you? Russian enough, I guess? Can you save us? Yeah, okay, well I think that's all I've got for this week. I'm gonna probably just keep watching this for the time being once I hop off stream. But of course, if you want to, the speediest place to get an update on all of this is probably still going to be trletter.com, which comes out in 24 hours. We'll have our whole hot take cauldron ready to be served for your enjoyment. Also, a thank you to the show's sponsor, Blockfolio, of course. Blockfolio.com for the mobile trading app. Some more information and content around that soon. Subscribe to the channel. Let's get to 17k likes. Not likes, that's a lot. 17k subscribers would be awesome. I very much enjoyed your company, as always. I hope going through the news stuff at the beginning wasn't too boring. Leave me a comment if it was. Leave me a comment if it wasn't. I think it's valuable, generally speaking. But, you as the audience are the ultimate arbiters of value. So I'm sure you'll let me know one way or another. Trade safe. Let's all keep our heads cool this week. Some big stuff on the calendar, and yeah, I'll see you in the newsletter on Tuesday. We have another Technical Roundup podcast episode coming out this week with RV Fellman, who is the head of trading at Block Tower. So that's going to be really cool. Just going to ask very difficult and alpha leak questions to try to get some interesting stuff out of him. So yeah, plenty to look forward to. Thanks for hanging out, guys. It's been fun as always, and I'll see you next time. Kisses and hugs. Bye bye.